So let's discuss kind of the elephant in the room as we are discussing off air, and that's kind of the status of Damian Lillard. Now let's kind of cut to the chase. Are you confident that he is committed to this team?
It's crazy, man. If you would have went back a year ago when we had this podcast and you'd have asked this question, I would have laughed at you because the idea of Damian Lillard not being in Portland would just be so ridiculous because of his loyalty, not only to the franchise and to the team, but to the city and to the fan base. Part of his brand has been loyalty. And you might even say he's been loyal to a fault because he wants to be the guy that brings glory to this city, to go to the mountaintop with a team that believed in him and drafted him out of Weber State and said, "You're going to be our franchise player." He wants to be the greatest Portland Trailblazer of all time. He's said those things throughout his, the past 9 seasons here in Portland. And that hasn't changed. And even today, hearing him talk to the local media and the team's final practice before the season opener, he was very clear to say that he's all in on this season. He wants to be here. He doesn't want to leave Portland. With that said, how crazy of an offseason that this has been, where we don't get stuff like that here in Portland, where we're hearing about a player who is dissatisfied with the team or, isn't exactly pleased. We're not used to that here. Everything is super tight-knit between the organization. So the fact that we got to that point where Chris Haynes is reporting on stuff, who has a very close relationship with Damian Lillard, to the point where Damian Lillard is questioning his long-term future here, is definitely an eyebrow-raising moment. And it's the unthinkable for Trailblazers fans to even think that Damian Lillard could one day not be in a Trailblazers uniform. You take into the fact that, he's just going into his, 4-year Supermax contract that should lock him up here for the next, till 2025, essentially. It was something that I don't think anybody really thought about. But when you lose in the first round of the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years, and you're dealing with a guy that is super competitive and wants to win at the highest level, what do you expect? And I think that's been the understanding here within the fan base, within the media, is something's got to change here because, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so really what you're seeing is Damian Lillard putting a lot more pressure on the front office to get something done, to make this roster more competitive. Because when you look at it, even heading into the offseason, you're thinking to yourself, man, how do the Trailblazers match up with the Lakers, the Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns, the Clippers? You go down the list, and I don't think you feel too good about the Blazers' chances. They could catch lightning in a bottle like they did in 2019 and be able to get to the Western Conference Finals, ride Damian Lillard all the way, because we've seen how terrific he's been. One of the best players in the NBA, top 10 in the NBA, an all-NBA player, an all-star. So maybe that happens. But I think Damian Lillard wanted to say, I want you guys to show the same efforts that I'm doing on the court. You mentioned that 55-10, incredible performance, one of the greatest offensive playoff performances that you will ever see. And at some point, Dame, he's not going to come out and say, I'm tired of carrying you guys, but he needs some help. And that's really what the bottom line is. But the clock is ticking. Damian Lillard is in his prime right now. And so I don't blame him if after this season, it's another first-round exit, or even worse, they don't make the playoffs, that Damian Lillard is fed up to the point where he demands a trade. Now that is in play. Now that is the storyline within this organization is, are you doing enough to keep Damian Lillard satisfied? And we're going to find out. The first order of business in the eyes of General Manager Neil Olshey was to let Terry Stotts go and bring in a new head coach in Chauncey Billups. Chauncey Billups is an excellent communicator. I've been really impressed the couple of times that I've had a chance to ask him questions and sit in press conferences and hear him, say what he wants this team to be. There's going to be some growing pains along the way this season with a new head coach who's installing a new offense, a new defense. Guys are going to have different roles than they've had before. And the bench is totally different than the one we saw before. You lose Enes Kanter, you lose Carmelo Anthony, you bring in guys like Larry Nance Jr., Cody Zeller, Tony Snell. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, but they were able to sign Norman Powell to a long-term deal, so your starting five stays intact, which offensively was elite, was top 5 in the NBA this year. On the other end, that defense was horrid. It was terrible. They couldn't guard anyone. They were one of the worst defenses for most of the season. And so there's so many things that have to change with this team to make you believe that they are going to be a contender. Now, I think the one of the major storylines, and we can go in whatever direction you guys want to go in this podcast, but the defense is the focal point with this team. But they've got to stay healthy. Health will be what gives this team that chance. Yusuf Nurkic has to be able to stay on the floor. CJ McCollum started last season on an all-star tear. He was balling, playing the best basketball of his career. Then he gets hurt, comes back. The flow of this team, it was super makeshift. And, by the time they got back together, there was never that. They were never in sync the same way they were at the beginning of the year. And they still won, 42 games, got to the 6th seed. But they were exposed in that first-round playoff matchup with a Denver Nuggets squad that was missing multiple players. Mm-hmm. Jamal Murray at the top of the list. So injuries is going to be so key in the roles that CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic play in helping Damian Lillard have some postseason success beyond just getting there. And so all of that to say, it is a real discussion that at the end of this year, there will be some serious reflecting. I think Damian Lillard will be here for the entire season. I don't think this will be a distraction. The way that Damian Lillard has answered this question during media day, when he was at the Olympics, the way that he's handled it even today in the final, presser before the start of the season, which has been, I want to be in Portland. I'm dedicated to this team. I want to see it through. But after this season, this story is not going away. This narrative, the storyline, it is here until we see some significant postseason success. And Damian Lillard has said all along, look, I just want to see urgency. I want to see you guys do something. And so Here we are heading into the start of this season on Wednesday night with the Portland Trail Blazers. Let's see how things go.